Hey everyone, welcome back to Inside Vietnam. I'm your host, and today we've got a story that's going to hit different. This one's about Vince, a 63-year-old IT guy from New Jersey who came to Saigon looking for something he couldn't even name. What he found was a connection that felt real, a woman who seemed different from all the stories he'd heard, and a version of himself he thought he'd lost forever. But sometimes the things that feel most real are the things we need to question the most. This is a story about loneliness, about second chances, and about how easy it is to mistake attention for something deeper when you're desperate to feel alive again. What happened to Vince in Saigon changed everything: his bank account, his health, his relationship with his daughter, and ultimately, his understanding of who he'd become. Here's his story, in his own words. Look, I spent 30 years being invisible. That's what IT support is, really. You're the guy people only notice when something's broken. Printer jammed? Call Vince. Password reset? Call Vince. Server down at 2 a.m.? Call Vince. I worked in a beige cubicle in a mid-sized logistics company in Teaneck, New Jersey. Same desk for 3 decades. Same fluorescent lights. Same carpet that hadn't been replaced since 1995. I fixed problems. That was my identity. The invisible man who made the visible world work. I married Linda in 1995, met her at a friend's barbecue in Inglewood. She was a dental hygienist, practical, funny, kind. We bought a house in Paramus in 1998, 3 bedrooms, decent yard, mortgage we could actually afford. We couldn't have kids, tried for years. Went through the whole fertility nightmare, so we adopted Sarah when we were in our late 30s. Best decision we ever made. She was this bright, fierce little girl who grew into an even brighter, fiercer woman. Linda and Sarah, they were everything. Then in 2017, Linda started having stomach pains. By the time they caught it, the ovarian cancer was stage 3. We had 5 years together after that diagnosis. 5 years of chemo, radiation, clinical trials that didn't work, alternative treatments that definitely didn't work, and watching the woman I loved disappear piece by piece. I kept working through all of it because we needed the insurance. So I'd be at my desk troubleshooting email issues during the day and holding Linda's hand during midnight bathroom emergencies at night. People talk about caregiver burnout like it's being tired. It's not. It's deeper than that. It's watching someone suffer and being completely powerless. It's having every conversation become about symptoms and medications and appointment schedules. It's the way you stop being a husband and become a nurse, a cook, a person who changes sheets and empties bedpans and pretends everything's going to be okay when you both know it isn't. When Linda died in October 2022, you know what I felt? Nothing. Not grief, not relief, not sadness. Just this vast, empty quiet. Like someone had turned off a machine that had been running for 5 years, and now the silence was deafening. I retired 3 months later. The company offered me a party. I declined. Cleaned out my desk, turned in my badge, walked out of that building for the last time at 62 years old with no idea what I was supposed to do with however many years I had left. Sarah was living in Boston by then with her fiancé Tom, building her own life. She'd call every Sunday, and I could hear the worry in her voice. Dad, are you eating? Dad, are you getting out of the house? Dad, maybe you should talk to someone? I'd tell her I was fine. I wasn't fine. We sold the Paramus house. Too many memories. Too many rooms that Linda would never walk through again. After the mortgage was paid off, I had about $165,000. More money than I'd ever had at one time in my life. I moved into a 1-bedroom rental in Fort Lee. One of those modern buildings with gray walls and gray floors and windows that looked out at other buildings with gray walls and gray floors. I spent 6 months in that apartment just existing. Ordered takeout most nights, Chinese, pizza, whatever. Watched Netflix, slept. Woke up, repeated. Sarah's Sunday calls became the only thing I looked forward to, and even those just reminded me that I had nothing to tell her. How are you, Dad? Good, sweetheart. Same as last week. I was 63 years old, recently retired, sitting on more money than I'd saved in my entire working life, and I was just waiting to die. Not actively suicidal or anything dramatic like that, just waiting. Going through the motions until whatever came next. That's when Mike started texting me. Mike was a former colleague who'd taken early retirement and moved to Thailand a couple years back. He'd post these photos on Facebook: beaches, cheap beer, smiling people, street food that looked incredible. His messages to me were always the same theme: get out of Jersey before it kills you too, man. There's a whole world out there and you're wasting it in a rental apartment. I'd ignore him mostly. What was I going to do in Thailand? I was 63, overweight from a year of takeout and grief. And I knew exactly one phrase in any Asian language, which was thank you, in Mandarin, from a cultural sensitivity training we did at work in 2008. But the messages kept coming. And one night in March 2023, sitting in that gray apartment eating cold lo mein and watching some forgettable show I'd already forgotten by the time I went to bed, I thought, why not? What exactly am I staying here for? I started researching. Bangkok seemed too chaotic, too overwhelming. Chiang Mai felt too hippie, too yoga retreat. But Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City there was something about it that spoke to me. It was a city that worked. The photos showed modern infrastructure, coffee shops, expat communities, a place where someone with my particular skill set might still feel useful, where things functioned, where I could maybe figure out how to be a person again instead of just a ghost in a fortly apartment. I didn't tell Sarah what I was planning. I knew she'd worry, try to talk me out of it, and I didn't want to be talked out of it. I booked a one-way ticket to Ho Chi Minh City for late April 2023, gave my landlord notice, packed 2 suitcases with clothes and put everything else in storage. The night before I left, Sarah called for her Sunday check-in. I almost told her, but instead I just said, I'm doing good, sweetheart. Actually feeling a little better lately. It wasn't entirely a lie. For the first time in over a year, I felt something. Not happiness exactly, but possibility. Like maybe there was something on the other side of this emptiness. I wasn't running toward Vietnam. I wasn't looking for adventure or reinvention or some grand second act. One was just running away from nothing, from gray walls and takeout containers and the endless quiet of a life that had stopped having a point. I had $165,000 in my bank account, a one-way ticket, and absolutely no idea what I was doing. Looking back now, that last part was more true than I could have possibly understood. I landed at Tan Son Nhat Airport on a Thursday afternoon in early May 2023, and the heat hit me like opening an oven door. I'm talking about humidity that makes New Jersey summers feel like air conditioning. The second I walked out of the terminal, my glasses fogged up and sweat started running down my back. The airport was chaos. Taxi drivers shouting in Vietnamese, motorbikes everywhere, people holding signs with names I couldn't read. I had no idea what I was doing. I'd booked a hotel online, some modest place in District 1 for $35 a night, and I just pointed at the address on my phone to a taxi driver who nodded and quoted me a price I had no context for. Could have been a fair rate. Could have been triple. Didn't matter. I was here. The drive into the city was sensory overload. Motorbikes. That's the first thing that hits you about Saigon, not hundreds of them. Thousands. Rivers of motorbikes flowing around cars, cutting across lanes, entire families on a single bike, dad driving, mom on the back, kid sandwiched in the middle, sometimes a second kid on mom's lap, no helmets half the time. Incredible, terrifying, mesmerizing. And the noise. Honking, but not aggressive. Honking like New York. More like a constant conversation between vehicles. Beep beep, I'm here. Beep, passing you. Beep, 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 watch out. Construction sounds everywhere. Saigon was being built and rebuilt simultaneously. And underneath it all, the hum of life. People selling things from carts, music bleeding out of shops, someone's karaoke at 2 in the afternoon. The smells hit you in waves. Exhaust mixed with incense, mixed with something cooking. Faux broth, grilled meat, fish sauce, coffee, flowers. Every block smelled different. It was overwhelming and alive in a way that Fort Lee had never been. I checked into the hotel, a narrow building squeezed between 2 others on a side street. My room was tiny, clean enough, AC that barely worked. A window that looked out at another building 3 feet away. I dropped my bags and just sat on the bed for probably 20 minutes, listening to the city outside, wondering what the hell I'd done. That first week, I just walked. That's all I did. I'd wake up early because of the jet lag. Go downstairs where the hotel owner would give me terrible instant coffee and a confused smile, and then I'd walk for hours. District 1 is the tourist center, so it's got the big hotels and the Western restaurants and the backpacker bars. But even there, you've got the real Saigon underneath. Little alleyways where locals are eating breakfast at plastic tables that are maybe a foot high. Old ladies selling baguettes. Guys fixing motorbikes right on the sidewalk. I ate pho 3 times the first day because I didn't know how to order anything else. You just point at what other people are eating and nod. The broth is different than any Vietnamese place in Jersey Cleaner somehow, more herbal. and it's like $1.50 for a huge bull. Kept doing the math in my head. Back home, bad pho cost $12. By the end of that first week, I'd found an apartment, nothing fancy. Bin Thant district, which is more local, less touristy. $450 a month for a studio on the 4th floor, no elevator. Basic furniture, a bed, a table, a bathroom with a squat toilet, and a shower that was basically a hose attached to the wall. The landlady spoke maybe 10 words of English. I spoke 0 Vietnamese. We used a calculator to negotiate the rent and security deposit. Done. I settled into a routine without really planning one. That's the thing about Saigon, it has a rhythm, and you just sort of fall into it. Mornings, I go to a little cafe around the corner from my building. Ca Pha Soir, the iced coffee with condensed milk. They make it with this metal filter thing that drips slowly into your glass. First week, I tried to drink it in 5 minutes American style, and almost had a heart attack from the caffeine. The owner, this older guy who always wore a Barcelona jersey, he figured out my order after day 3. Never learned his name. He never learned mine. But every morning, 7:30, he'd see me coming and start making my coffee. Afternoons, I'd explore. The War Remnants Museum. The Independence Palace. Parks where old guys played chess and did Tai Chi. I'd sit on benches and watch the city move. Everyone was doing something. Selling something, building something, going somewhere. I'd spent a year sitting still, and here was a whole city that didn't know how to stop. Evenings, I started finding the expat bars. Not the backpacker party places, but the quiet spots where older foreigners gathered. The kind of bars where everyone's got a story and nobody asks too many questions. I'd nurse a Saigon beer about 70 cents and listen. Guys who'd been here 10 years, 20 years, married local women, started businesses, burned through money, found peace, lost peace. I wasn't looking for community or friendship. I was just existing in a place where nobody knew me as the guy whose wife died, or the IT guy who'd retired, or the sad man in the Fort Lee apartment. About 6 weeks in, late June, I met Graham. British guy, maybe 70, from Manchester originally, but he'd been bouncing around Asia for 15 years. He had that expat look, sunburned, cargo shorts, sandals with socks, completely unbothered by everything. We got talking at a place called the Spotted Cow, some British pub that served terrible fish and chips for $8. He asked where I was from. I told him Jersey. He asked how long I'd been here. I told him 6 weeks. He said, "You got that new arrival look, still figuring out if you made a massive mistake." I laughed because it was true. He invited me to Tuesday karaoke night at a place called Lucky Strike. I almost said no. Karaoke isn't my thing, never has been. But Graham insisted. "It's not one of those places, mate. Just regular folks having a sing, mix of expats and locals. Nothing dodgy." So on a Tuesday night in late June, I went. Lucky Strike was in District 1, down a side street near Ben Thanh Market. Not a nightclub, not a bar, just a decent-sized room with tables, a small stage, a screen showing lyrics, Vietnamese and English. It was maybe half full when Graham and I arrived around 8. Older expats like us, some younger Vietnamese couples, groups of friends. Graham knew half the room, waved and nodded, led me to a table near the back. "Saigon beer?" he asked. I nodded. He ordered 2. I sat there nursing my beer, watching people take turns on stage. Some were terrible, some were pretty good, most were somewhere in between. The crowd was friendly, clapping for everyone, laughing with them, not at them. It felt normal, like a community center talent show back in Jersey, except in Vietnamese and English and the occasional Tagalog. Then she took the stage. Woman in her mid-30s, jeans and a simple white blouse, long dark hair pulled back. She picked up the microphone and the opening notes of Shallow, From a Star is Born, started playing. You know the song Lady Gaga, Bradley Cooper, the big duet. She sang it perfectly. And I mean perfectly. Flawless English, real emotion, not just karaoke but performance. The room went quiet. Even Graham stopped mid-sip of his beer. When she finished, the place erupted. Everyone clapping, a couple guys whistling. She smiled, gave a little bow, and walked back to a table where 3 other women were sitting, all of them congratulating her. "That's Lynn," Graham said. "She's a regular. Comes with her friends most Tuesdays. English teacher or something." I watched her laughing with her friends, completely unself-conscious. She didn't look like she was working the room or looking for attention. She just looked happy. About 20 minutes later, Graham waved Lynn and her friends over. Introductions were made. Lynn, Mai, Han, Trang. They were friendly, speaking English pretty well, asking where we were from. When Lynn heard New Jersey, she lit up. Oh, like The Sopranos. You know Tony Soprano? I laughed. Different part of Jersey. One was more, have you tried turning it off and on again? Then I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse. She didn't get it for a second, then cracked up. You work computers? Work dot, past tense. Retired. And you come to Vietnam? To retire? Something like that. Mostly just to not be where I was. She nodded like she understood. No follow-up questions, no prying. We talked about movies she'd seen everything, loved American films, about Saigon, she was born here, loved it, complained about the traffic like everyone else. About teaching, she worked part-time at a language center in District 3, helping adults improve their English for business. Her friends drifted back to their table. Graham started talking to some Australian guy he knew. It was just Lynn and me for maybe 15 minutes. Easy conversation, nothing heavy. She asked about New Jersey. I asked about growing up in Saigon. She made fun of how I pronounced pho. I made fun of myself for everything. When they were getting ready to leave, she pulled out her phone. You have Zalo? Zalo is the messaging app everyone uses in Vietnam. I downloaded it but barely used it. Yeah, I've got it. Maybe we can practice English sometime? I always want to improve. And you probably want to learn Vietnamese, yes? She said it naturally. Not flirty, not suggestive. Just friendly. We exchanged contacts. She smiled, said goodbye, left with her friends. Graham looked at me. Careful, mate. What? We're just talking. Yeah, that's how it starts. Just talking. I walked home that night, through streets that were still alive at 11 p.m., food stalls open, people eating late dinners, motorbikes everywhere. The humidity had broken just slightly, and there was almost a breeze. For the first time since Linda died, I felt something. Not happiness, exactly. Not excitement. Just interest. Like maybe tomorrow was worth seeing. I was 63 years old, halfway around the world, and I'd just met a woman who sang beautifully and laughed at my terrible jokes. Looking back now, I should have listened to Graham. We started meeting for coffee the week after Lucky Strike. Nothing formal. No dates, really, just Lynn messaging me on Zalo. You want coffee this afternoon? And I'd say yes, because what else was I doing? Early July, we met maybe once a week. Always daytime. Always at normal Vietnamese cafes. The kind with plastic chairs and ceiling fans, where coffee cost 25,000 dong, about $1.20. She'd suggest places in District 1 or Bin Thon, never anywhere fancy. And here's the thing that made me trust her from the start. She always offered to split the bill. Every single time. No, I pay mine, she'd say, pulling out her phone to transfer money. And I'd wave her off. Come on, it's $5. I got it. But the fact that she offered, that mattered to me. She wasn't angling for free meals. She had her own money, her own life. She told me about her job teaching English part-time at a language center in District 3. 3 mornings a week, helping office workers improve their business English. She'd studied tourism at university here in Saigon, had dreams of working at hotels when she graduated in 2019, but then COVID hit and the entire industry collapsed. So she pivoted to teaching, picked up some administrative work on the side, lived with a roommate in a small apartment near Tan Dinh Market. It all sounded normal, real, like she was an actual person with an actual life, not someone playing a role. By late July, we were meeting twice a week. She'd take me to places tourists never see, the Jade Emperor Pagoda, where incense smoke hung so thick you could barely see, the back streets of District 5, where everything was in Chinese characters, and the food was different from the rest of Saigon. She taught me Vietnamese phrases for the market. Bao Hie Tien? How much? Dot qua. Too expensive. The vendors would laugh when I tried to say these things, but they appreciated the effort. We visited the Fine Arts Museum on a Wednesday afternoon in early August. It was nearly empty, cool inside, quiet. We walked through exhibits of Vietnamese art propaganda posters from the war, traditional paintings, modern stuff I didn't really understand. At one point, standing in front of a painting of a woman in an ao dai, Lynn asked about Linda. Your wife, she said. You said she's gone? I'd been vague about it at Lucky Strike, said the marriage was over. Now I told her the truth, that Linda had died from cancer, that I'd been her caregiver for 5 years, that by the end, I wasn't a husband anymore, just a person keeping another person alive until that wasn't possible either. Lynn listened, didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes. When I finished, she just said, that's very hard, to watch that, to keep going. Yeah, it was. And now you come to Vietnam to start again? Something like that, mostly just to not be there anymore. She nodded like she understood. We moved to the next painting. I also helped her with Excel. She mentioned one day that the language center wanted her to track student attendance and grades, but she couldn't figure out the formulas. I'm an IT guy. This is what I do. We spent an afternoon at a cafe near her place, my laptop open, showing her how to use VLOOKUP, how to create pivot tables. Basic stuff for me, but she was grateful, taking notes, asking questions. See, this is what made Lynn different. We had reciprocity. She taught me Vietnamese. I taught her Excel. She showed me Saigon. I paid for coffee. It felt balanced. Equal, not transactional in that gross way where everything's calculated. Just two people enjoying each other's company. By mid-August, we were meeting 3, sometimes 4 times a week. Still just coffee and walking around, nothing physical, nothing romantic in the obvious sense. But I looked forward to seeing her. She made me laugh. She was smart, curious, easy to talk to. And crucially, I need you to understand this. She never asked me for anything. Not once. Until she did. It was a Thursday afternoon, 3rd week of August. We were at our usual spot, this little cafe in Binh Thanh, where the owner's wife made incredible banh mi. Lynn seemed distracted, kept checking her phone, and finally I asked if something was wrong. She hesitated. It's my mother. In Tianjin. She's sick. Needs tests. What kind of tests? Liver. Maybe cancer, maybe not. But the tests are expensive. She showed me paperwork on her phone, hospital documents, all in Vietnamese. I couldn't read any of it, but there were numbers. 18 million dong. How much is that in dollars? I asked. About 800. Maybe a little more with dollar rate now. She looked embarrassed, ashamed even. I have some savings, but not enough. I asked my roommate, maybe borrow, but here's where I should have paused. Should have asked questions. Should have at least wondered why she was showing me this. But I didn't, because in that moment I saw a woman I cared about struggling with something I could fix. $800? I had 165,000 in my account. 800 was nothing. I'll help, I said. No, Vince, I can't. It's nothing, really. I want to help. She started crying. Right there in the cafe, tears running down her face. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. I pay you back. When I get paid next month, I pay back. Don't worry about it. Just make sure your mom gets the tests. She transferred me her bank details. I sent the money that night. 18 million dong, 793, after the exchange rate and fees. I felt good. Not like a sucker, but like a good person. Like someone who'd done a decent thing for someone who needed help. For the first time since Linda died, I felt useful again. 2 weeks later, her motorbike broke down. She called me around noon. Her motorbike wouldn't start. She'd taken it to a mechanic near her apartment. The transmission was shot. The repair quote was 14 million dong, about 600. I'm so sorry to ask, she said, but I don't have. The test for my mother, it took all my savings. I can maybe take bus, but for teaching job, I need to be at school by 7 in morning, and bus doesn't come until 7:30. She was mortified, genuinely distressed. And again, 600? What's 600 when you're sitting on 165,000 and someone you care about needs basic transportation to get to work? I transferred the money. She promised to pay me back. I told her not to worry about it. Here's what I told myself, and I need you to understand the rationalization because this is how it works. These weren't luxury purchases. She wasn't asking for jewelry or designer bags or expensive dinners. She wasn't asking for iPhones or trips or rent money. These were survival expenses. Medical tests for her sick mother. Transportation to get to work. Basic human needs. And she had documentation. The hospital paperwork. The mechanic's quote. She showed me everything. It all looked legitimate. Plus, I had the money. What's 1,400 to someone with 105,000? Back in Jersey, I'd have spent that on a month's rent alone for that sterile Fort Lee apartment. Here, I was helping someone I genuinely cared about get through tough situations. I wasn't being taken advantage of. I was being a good person. That's what I told myself. Looking back now, I can see exactly where I went wrong. But in August 2023, sitting in Saigon cafes with a woman who laughed at my jokes and taught me Vietnamese and seemed to genuinely enjoy my company, I couldn't see it at all. She seemed different. That was the whole thing. She had her own life, her own job, her own friends. She didn't work in a bar. She didn't hang around tourist areas looking for foreign men. She was just a regular Vietnamese woman trying to get by, and I happened to be someone who could help. Different. That's the word I kept coming back to. She was different, and I was different too. I wasn't some desperate old guy chasing bar girls. I was just helping a friend. That's what I believed. And belief, when you need it badly enough, can make you blind to everything else. Late September, Lynn mentioned her landlord was raising rent. We were sitting at a coffee shop near the Saigon River, watching the evening motorbike traffic, when she brought it up. My landlord want more money next month. I cannot afford deposit for new place. She looked stressed, genuinely worried. And that's when I had the idea, not her, me. Look, I said, I'm paying $450 for my place in Bin Thon. You're paying what, $300 for your room? We could find a two-bedroom somewhere nice, split it. We're spending time together anyway, right? Makes financial sense. She hesitated. That's what got me. She didn't jump at it. She looked uncomfortable. I don't know, Vince. That's big step. We'd each have our own room, just roommates, but nicer place, split the cost, win-win. She thought about it for 2 days before saying yes. And her hesitation? That made me trust her more. If she was running a game, she would have said yes immediately. Right? We found a place in District 2, near Tao Dien. The expat area, lots of cafes, cleaner streets, younger vibe. 2 bedrooms, modern kitchen, actual shower instead of a hose on the wall. 26 million dong a month, about a 1,100. Here's where the math started getting fuzzy. She couldn't contribute much, maybe 200 toward groceries. So I paid the rent. All of it. Plus the deposit, 2 months up front. But I told myself it was still cheaper than what I'd been spending in Jersey, and way better than living alone. We moved in early October. She made it a home immediately, bought plants for the balcony, hung curtains, cooked dinner most nights. Com tam with grilled pork. Bun cha con chua soup that was so sour it made my eyes water, but I loved it anyway. The apartment smelled like fish sauce and lemongrass and cooking oil, and after years of microwave dinners and takeout containers, it felt like living again. I was 63 years old, living with a 34-year-old Vietnamese woman in Saigon, and it felt normal, natural, like partnership. Sarah video called more frequently that fall. Every Sunday, sometimes Wednesdays too. She was planning her wedding for October 2024, showing me venue options, asking my opinion on things I had no opinion about. How are you doing, Dad? Really? Good, sweetheart. Really good. Are you seeing anyone? The question hung there. I could have told her the truth. But what was the truth? That I was living with someone? That we weren't dating, not officially, just 2 people sharing space and meals and companionship? Just making friends, I said. Don't worry about your old man. She didn't look convinced, but she let it drop. The financial requests kept coming, but they felt reasonable, logical even. Mid-October, Lynn's phone died. Not broke, died. Wouldn't turn on, wouldn't charge. She showed me, pressing buttons, nothing. She'd had it 3 years. It was time. A new Samsung was 9 million dong, about 400. I can wait, she said. Maybe save for 2 months. But she needed a phone for work, for coordinating with her students. I transferred the money. Early November, her friend Mai, one of the women from that first night at Lucky Strike, was opening a cafe in District 1. Small place, good location near the backpacker area. They needed investors, 10% stake for 8,000. Lynn showed me the business plan. It was in Vietnamese, but there were numbers I could follow. Rent projections, equipment costs, expected revenue. It looked official, professional. Maya's very smart business, Lynn said. This cafe will be successful. You get money back, plus profit. $8,000. That was real money. I hesitated. Can I meet Mai? See the location? Of course. Next week we go see. But next week came, and Mai had COVID. Then the landlord was doing repairs. Then Mai's uncle who owned the space was traveling. There was always a reason we couldn't visit yet, but the timeline for the investment was closing. They needed the money by mid-November to secure the lease. I transferred it 190 million dong, $8,000. In my head, I was now an investor in a Vietnamese cafe. I'd get returns. It was business, not charity. Then came Tet preparation. Mid-November, still months before actual Tet. But Lynn explained her family needed money now to buy gifts, prepare food, fix up the house. It's a huge deal in Vietnam. the biggest holiday, more important than Christmas. Everyone goes home, families reunite, you can't show up empty-handed. 58 million dong, about 2,500. She showed me a list her mother had made. Gold jewelry for the grandmother, new ao dai for her sister, repairs to the family house, food preparation. It was itemized, specific. This is too much to ask, Lynn said. I'm so sorry, but family is very important in Vietnam. I cannot go home with nothing. I transferred the money. By the end of November, I'd spent roughly 28,000 in 6 months. I did the math one night while Lynn was out with her friends. Medical bills, motorbike, security deposits, phone, cafe investment, tet money. $28,000. But here's the rationalization, and it felt airtight at the time. Back in Jersey, my rent alone would have been $2,500 to $3,000 a month. That's $15,000 to $18,000 for 6 months just on rent, plus food, utilities, existing in that gray apartment with nothing to do and nobody to talk to. Here, for $28,000, I had a nice apartment in a good neighborhood, home-cooked meals, companionship, purpose. I was teaching her Excel, helping her with English, solving her problems. I felt useful again, necessary. Not like a burned-out caregiver or a retired IT guy with no identity, but like a man who mattered to someone. The math worked. Or I made it work. One night in late November, after a particularly good dinner she'd made bun bo hue, this spicy beef noodle soup from central Vietnam that took her 4 hours to prepare, we sat on the balcony watching the city lights. Saigon never sleeps. Even at 10 p.m. you could hear motorbikes, karaoke from 3 buildings over, life happening everywhere. You know, Lynn said, you saved my life. I laughed it off. Come on. No, really. Before you, I was so stuck. No money, bad job, family always needing help. I was drowning. Then you come, and everything is better. She put her hand on mine. You are a good man, Vince. Very kind. I went to bed that night feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not just useful, but valued. Not just solving someone's problem, but actually building something with someone. A partnership. Maybe even a relationship. Though we hadn't defined it, and I wasn't pushing. I had 137,000 left in my account. More than enough to live on for years in Vietnam. And I had someone who needed me, appreciated me, made me feel like the past year of emptiness had been worth surviving to get here. Looking back now, I can see exactly where I should have stopped. Should have asked questions. Should have noticed that every time I turned around, there was another expense, another crisis, another reason to open my wallet. But in November 2023, sitting on that balcony with Lynn's hand on mine and the smell of spicy soup still in the air, and Saigon glowing below us, I couldn't see any of it. I just knew I felt alive again. And I'd convinced myself that was worth whatever it cost. By December, I'd spent 35,000, but I barely thought about it anymore. I was living a life. That's what I kept telling myself. This was what it cost to actually live, instead of just exist. I'd become part of the neighborhood. The woman who sold banh mi on our corner knew I liked extra pat, no cilantro. The security guard at our building nodded and said, Chow Ung, every time I walked past. I'd learned to navigate Saigon, knew which Exion drivers charged fare rates, which coffee shops had the best café soi da, how to cross 6 lanes of motorbike traffic without dying. I was even teaching. Lynn mentioned her language center needed someone to help students with basic computer skills. Word, Excel, email. I'd never actually visited the place, but she described it often enough. Small office in District 3, maybe 15 students total, adults trying to improve their job prospects. I'd video call into classes twice a week, walk them through spreadsheets and formatting. It felt good, useful, like my 30 years of IT experience actually mattered to someone. Christmas came. Sarah video called on Christmas morning, Boston time, which was Christmas night for me. She was at Tom's parents' house, everyone in matching sweaters, the tree lit up behind her. She looked happy but concerned. Dad, how are you? Really? Good, sweetheart. Really good. You sound different. I can't put my finger on it. But you sound, I don't know. Are you okay? I was sitting on our balcony, Lynn inside cleaning up after dinner, Saigon glowing in the December heat. Back in Jersey, it would be freezing, gray, dead. Here, I could hear karaoke from 3 buildings over, smell grilled meat from a street vendor, watch the city pulse with life. I'm better than I've been in years, honey. I promise. She didn't look convinced. You'd tell me if something was wrong, right? Of course, but nothing's wrong. I'm just living, finally. We talked about her wedding plans. October 2024, somewhere in Vermont, she was thinking. Outdoor ceremony if the weather cooperated. She wanted me there, obviously. Of course I'd be there. My daughter's wedding, nothing would keep me away. When we hung up, Lynn came out with 2 glasses of Bayahoy, the local draft beer. We sat watching the city, and I felt content. This was my life now. It was working. Then January happened. Lynn came to me one evening, looking stressed. The cafe investment Maya's place that was supposed to open in December had hit a snag. The landlord was playing hardball with the lease, wanted more money up front. They needed another 160 million dong, about 7,000, to secure the space, or they'd lose everything, including my original $8,000 investment. I hesitated. For the first time, I actually hesitated. That's a lot of money, Lynn. I know. I'm so sorry. But if we don't do this, we lose everything. Mai says if we can give this money, lease is signed next week, cafe opens in February. She showed me photos on her phone. Interior shots of a nice space-exposed brick, modern furniture, big windows. It looked professional, real. Can I talk to Mai? Can we meet at the actual location? She's in Dalot right now, meeting suppliers. But look, here is address, here is photos, here is new contract. She showed me documents in Vietnamese. I couldn't read any of it, but it looked official. Stamps, signatures, dense paragraphs of text, $7,000. That would bring my total investment to $15,000. That would bring my total spending to $42,000. But if I didn't do it, I'd lose the $8,000 I'd already put in. Sunk cost fallacy, I knew it even then. I'd spent 30 years in IT. I understood basic logic. But knowing something intellectually and acting on it are different things. I transferred the money, bought 160 million dong, 7,000 dong. Looking back, I can see exactly what I should have done. I should have insisted on meeting Mai. I should have visited the actual location. I should have had someone who read Vietnamese look at the contracts. I should have done 100 things I didn't do. But I was in deep. And when you're in deep, you convince yourself that the next investment will make everything work out. February brought another change. Lynn started working evening shifts. Language Center added night classes, she explained. For working professionals who can't come during day, they ask if I can teach, is good money. 3 nights a week, sometimes 4. She'd leave around 7 p.m., come back around midnight, smelling like air conditioning and chalk dust and sometimes cigarettes, but lots of Vietnamese women smoked. That wasn't unusual. I used those nights well. Video called Sarah more frequently. Watched Netflix. Enjoyed the quiet. After 5 years of Linda needing me every moment, there was something peaceful about evenings alone. I wasn't lonely. I had Lynn. She'd come home. We'd talk about our days, go to bed. It felt domestic, normal, real. By the end of February, I'd spent 43,000 total. I had 122,000 left in my account. I was thinking long-term now. Maybe I'd sell some of my remaining investments back in the States, bring another 50,000 over, really commit to this life. Maybe Lynn and I would make it official somehow. Maybe I'd found my second act. One Tuesday in late February, I suggested we go to Lucky Strike, where we'd met 9 months ago, nostalgia trip, come full circle. Maybe I'd even get up and sing something terrible. Lynn's reaction was immediate and strange. Oh, I don't really like that place anymore. Why not? We had fun there. It's just, I don't know, too loud, too many tourists now. Let's go somewhere else. Come on, it'll be fun. Where we met, remember? She got flustered. Actually flustered in a way I'd never seen. Vince, I just don't want to go there, okay? Can we please go different place? I dropped it. Told myself she'd just grown tired of the expat scene. Wanted to avoid the same old faces. People change preferences. It wasn't a big deal, but it was the first moment that felt genuinely off. Not the financial requests, those all had explanations. Not the evening shifts, people work evenings. But this visceral resistance to going back to Lucky Strike, the place where everything started. That felt wrong in a way I couldn't quite name. I pushed the feeling down. I was good at that. 30 years of troubleshooting had taught me to focus on what was working, not what might be broken. And most things were working. I had a home, companionship, purpose. I was living in Saigon, teaching computer skills, eating incredible food, feeling like a person instead of a ghost. $43,000 was a lot of money, sure, but I had 122,000 left. That was still more than enough. That's what I told myself in late February 2024, sitting on our balcony in District 2, watching the city move below me, Lynn inside on one of her evenings home, my daughter planning her wedding in Vermont, my old life in Fort Lee feeling like it belonged to someone else entirely. I told myself everything was fine, that I'd made the right choice coming here, that Lynn was different, and I was different, and we'd built something real. The cracks were there, small hairline fractures in the foundation, but I wasn't looking at the foundation. I was looking at the view, and the view is beautiful. I should have looked down. The video call came on a Wednesday afternoon in early March, not our usual Sunday slot, and Sarah's face on the screen looked serious in a way that made my stomach drop before she even spoke. I was alone in the apartment. Lynn was at her day teaching job, or so I thought. I answered the call sitting on the couch, and before I could even say hello, I heard the apartment door open behind me. Lynn walked in, saw me on the video call, and her face went completely white. She froze for just a second, then mouthed, "I give you privacy," and practically ran out of the room, back out the door, gone. Sarah noticed. Of course she noticed. "Dad, who was that?" "Just my friend Lynn. She lives here. I told you I had a roommate." "Your friend?" Sarah's voice got sharp in a way I'd never heard before. "Dad, does she know you're still married?" The confusion on my face must have said everything because Sarah closed her eyes and took a breath like she was preparing for something difficult. "Dad, I've been checking in on Mom's Facebook memorial page sometimes, just to see if anyone's posted memories or whatever, and 6 months ago, you posted something. I didn't remember posting anything. I barely used Facebook. September 23rd, you wrote, 6 years without you today. Still healing, still trying to find our forever together." "Dad, that was 6 months ago. Is this woman, does she think you're divorced?" The apartment suddenly felt wrong. The air conditioning was too cold. The traffic noise from outside too loud. Everything tilted slightly. When we first met, I told her Linda was gone, that the marriage was over. I didn't mean I wasn't trying to lie, Dad. Sarah's voice cracked. "If she thinks you're divorced and available, and you're living together, and you've been doing God knows what for 6 months while posting about Mom like that, Dad, what is happening?" We talked for another 20 minutes, her asking questions I couldn't answer, me trying to explain something I didn't understand myself. By the end, she was crying, and I was making promises I wasn't sure I could keep. "Please be careful," she said. "Please, Dad. I'm worried about you. I've been worried for months. You don't sound like yourself. You sound like, I don't know. Just please be careful." When the call ended, I sat in the silent apartment for an hour. Lynn didn't come back. The sun moved across the floor. Motorbikes honked outside. The world kept moving, and I sat completely still. When Lynn finally returned, she looked nervous. She came in quietly, put her bag down, didn't make eye contact. "I'm sorry I leave during your call. Is private family talk. I didn't want to. What do you think my situation is?" I interrupted. "With my wife?" She looked at me for a long moment, then said smoothly, like she'd prepared the answer, "You're divorced, yes? You told me you were divorced." "I never said divorced. You said she's gone. Marriage is over. That means divorced." "It means she died, Lynn. She died. I'm widowed." She blinked. "Oh, I didn't know. I'm sorry." But something in her face told me she either knew or didn't care which one it was. And for the first time since Lucky Strike 9 months ago, I wondered if I knew this person at all. That conversation opened something I couldn't close. Once you start seeing cracks, you can't unsee them. Over the next week, I noticed things I'd been deliberately not noticing. Lynn was on her phone constantly, smiling at messages she never shared. The evening teaching was happening 5 nights a week now, sometimes 6. When I suggested visiting her language center, "I'd love to see where you work, meet your students," she'd deflect. "It's very boring, just classrooms, maybe another time." On March 15th, I couldn't sleep. 2 a.m., lying in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, and I did what I'd been avoiding for months. I got up, opened my laptop, and started investigating. The cafe. May's Cafe that I'd invested $15,000 in total. Lynn had given me an address in District 1. I searched the business registration database. You can look these things up online in Vietnam. Nothing. No cafe registered at that address. No business license for Mai's name. I reverse image, searched the photos she'd shown me. Found them on a Hanoi coffee shop's Instagram from 2019. Stock photos. Generic interiors, nothing real. The nausea hit immediately. I barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up. The next evening, when Lynn left for her shift, I followed her. Grabbed a taxi, told the driver to follow the grab bike she'd taken. Felt like a detective in a bad movie. Felt pathetic and desperate and absolutely certain I needed to know. She didn't go to any language center. She went to a place called Diamond Lounge in District 3, red lights outside. Girls in short dresses smoking cigarettes by the entrance, music thumping from inside. The kind of place I'd convinced myself Lynn had nothing to do with. I didn't go in. Couldn't. Just took a taxi home and sat in the dark apartment until she returned at 1 a.m., smelling like cigarettes and perfume and everything I'd been pretending wasn't real. "Where were you tonight?" I asked when she walked in. She stopped, looked at me sitting there in the dark. Her face changed. Not scared, just tired, like she'd been waiting for this. "Teaching," she said. "I followed you. I know where you went." She set her bag down, with a cigarette, sat across from me and said, "You wanted to feel young and needed. I gave you that. I never lied about loving you. I just never said I wasn't with anyone else." The words didn't make sense at first. Then they did. Then I wished they didn't. Anyone else? She explained it all. Matter of fact. Clinical. She had a boyfriend, 4 years they'd been together. 29 years old, worked construction, didn't make much money. The apartment I thought belonged to her landlord, that was Tuan's place. My money had been supporting both of them. The medical bills were real from 3 years ago. She'd recycled the paperwork. The teaching job was real, 2 mornings a week, $200 a month. The hostess job was real, 4 nights a week, $600 a month plus tips. My money was the difference between them struggling and them being comfortable. "The cafe?" I asked, my voice barely working. "There is no cafe. I'm sorry. I needed the money." "Did you ever care at all?" She looked at me, and for the first time I saw something genuine in her face. Exhaustion. Maybe even a little regret. "I liked you. You were kind. But Vince, you're 63 and I'm 34, and you live in Vietnam paying my rent. What did you think this was?" She left that night, packed her clothes, took everything she'd brought, left the key on the counter. The door closed, and I sat in that $1,100 a month apartment I was paying for, alone, and did the math. 10 months, 47,000, gone. Every single dollar, gone. And the worst part, one couldn't even say I was blindsided. The signs were all there. I just chose not to see them, because seeing them would mean admitting I'd been exactly what I swore I'd never be. A lonely old man who mistook attention for affection and paid for the privilege of pretending otherwise. The week after Lynn left was darker than any week during Linda's illness. At least when Linda was dying, I was doing something. I had purpose, even if that purpose was just managing pain and pretending there was hope. This was different. This pain was mine. Self-inflicted. Stupid. I didn't leave the apartment for 5 days. Ordered delivery. Every meal fried chicken, pizza, late-night pho that tasted like nothing. Drank Saigon beer morning to afternoon to night, sitting on the balcony watching the city move while I stayed still. The motorbikes kept flowing. The vendors kept calling. The world kept going, and I just sat there replaying every moment, every choice, every lie I'd told myself. $47,000. Gone. And for what? For 10 months of pretending I wasn't exactly what I was, a lonely old man who paid for attention and called it love. When Sarah called on Sunday, our regular slot, I lied. "Everything's fine, honey." "Dad, you don't sound fine." "Just tired. Been working on some computer projects, staying busy." She didn't believe me. I could hear it in the silence. But what was I going to say? "Your old man got played for $47,000 by a woman who had a boyfriend the whole time. Your dad is exactly the cautionary tale he promised he'd never become." Sarah booked a flight to Saigon without asking. Showed up at my door on a Tuesday in early April. When I opened it, her face did something I'll never forget. Not anger. Heartbreak. I'd gained 20 pounds, maybe more. Beer and delivery food and self-pity. The apartment was a disaster: empty bottles, food containers, that smell of depression that's hard to describe but impossible to miss. And I must have looked like hell because Sarah just stood there for a moment, then hugged me and started crying. We sat on the balcony. I told her everything. The whole pathetic story from Lucky Strike to the moment Lynn walked out with her key on the counter. Sarah listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said, "Dad, you survived 5 years of cancer and caregiving. You survived losing Mom. And you almost threw it all away for someone who saw you as an ATM. That's when I broke, not for the money, but for the stupidity, for betraying Linda's memory, for nearly destroying my relationship with my daughter over attention from a woman who never saw me as anything but a resource. for being 63 years old and acting like a kid who thought he'd figured out something nobody else understood. I cried harder than I'd cried when Linda died, because that grief was clean. This grief was covered in shame. Sarah stayed a week, helped me break the lease, lost the 2-month deposit, 52 million dong, about 2,200, but got out. Found me a short-term place in District 7, basic studio, 600 a month, no memories. Threw out the beer. Made me eat actual meals. Sat with me while I logged into my bank account and faced the numbers. Started with 165,000. Now had 118,000. Lost 47,000 to Lynn plus another 3,500 in moving costs, deposits, breaking the lease. $50,500 total. Gone in 10 months. But I still had enough to retire modestly. The money would recover. It was the other stuff that wouldn't bounce back so easy. By late April, I booked a flight home. Mid-May departure. The Fort Lee apartment was still available. Landlord hadn't rented it, said he'd hold it for me. I'd go back, see a therapist, try to figure out how a 63-year-old IT guy from New Jersey got so turned around. My last week in Saigon, I went back to Lucky Strike. Tuesday night, same as always. Graham was there, same table, same Saigon beer. Vince, where the hell you been, mate? I sat down, ordered a beer, told him everything. He listened, nodding occasionally, and when I finished, he said, "Mate, you're the third bloke I've heard this from this year. She seemed different, yeah?" She did. That was the whole thing, she seemed different. They all do until they don't. We sat there for a while, watching people sing karaoke. And I thought about that first night, 9 months ago, when Lynn sang Shallow, and I walked home feeling interested in tomorrow for the first time in years. Here's what I learned, and I'm telling you this, because maybe it'll save someone else. The tuition I paid, I came to Vietnam running from emptiness, and I found exactly what I brought with me. I thought Lynn made me feel alive, but the truth is, I was using her attention as medication for pain I hadn't dealt with. The nightlife didn't just take my money, it took my judgment, my health, and almost took my daughter. I spent 30 years fixing other people's problems, and I couldn't see I was the problem that needed fixing. Linda deserved better than a husband who'd replace grief with delusion 6 months after she died. Sarah deserved better than a father who'd choose a fantasy over her phone calls. And I deserved better than settling for paid attention because I was too afraid to do the real work of healing. I'm back in Fort Lee now, May 2024. Same gray apartment, but it feels different. I see a therapist twice a week. Good guy, doesn't judge, just helps me sort through why I needed to be needed so badly that I stopped seeing reality. I'm down 8 pounds from cutting out the beer and actually cooking. Sarah visits monthly, driving down from Boston. We're rebuilding. It's slow, but it's real. I've got 118,000 left. That's still enough to retire on if I'm careful. The money will recover. I'll be okay financially. The dignity takes longer. But here's the thing I tell myself when it gets bad. Loneliness isn't solved by geography. You take yourself with you wherever you go. I flew halfway around the world to escape emptiness, and just imported it to Saigon with a side of self-deception. If you're watching this and thinking about doing what I did, if you're lonely, if you're broken, if you think a change of scenery will fix what's wrong, stop. Do the work first. Deal with your pain before you go looking for someone else to medicate it. Because that's not fair to them, and is sure as hell not fair to you. Vietnam isn't the problem. Lynn isn't a villain. She saw an opportunity and took it, and I made it as easy as possible because I wanted to believe I'd found something special. We were both using each other. The difference is, she knew it and I didn't. I'm 64 now, still invisible, still the guy who fixes things. But at least I'm working on fixing the right thing this time. Vince's story isn't unique. We hear variations of it constantly here at Inside Vietnam. The details change, but the pattern remains. Loneliness plus opportunity minus self-awareness equals expensive lessons. If you're watching this and seeing yourself in Vince's story, understand that Vietnam isn't the problem, and neither are Vietnamese people. The problem is using another person as a cure for problems that can only be solved internally. Vince is doing that work now, which makes him wiser than many who never learn the lesson. If this story resonated with you, helped you, or maybe saved you from making a similar mistake, leave a comment below. And remember, the best time to deal with your pain is before you buy the plane ticket. Until next time, this is Inside Vietnam.